and
for making the time.
Thank you.
We also have Mheshimiwa Mudhomi Njuki, who's a member of parliament for Chuka Igamba Ng'ombe.
Thank you.
And we have Professor Gitile Naituli, who's a commissioner with NCIC. We'll also have some guests on phone, and we'll be getting to that in a minute. Gentlemen, before we begin, I would like your reaction to statements that were made by the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, as well as the head of state, on the travel advisories that were issued. Let's listen in to what they had to say right after that, and then we'll get your reactions on that.
As government, we strongly believe that these advisories are driven by considerations other than security.
The last attacks I have not heard them issue travel advisories against the British who go to Paris. I have not heard them issue travel advisories against other European countries that have also been victims of terrorism. As much as they don't want their taxi drivers to come, President Obama has said he's coming.
All right, those are the statements that were made there by two of our leaders. Let's start with you, Professor. A lot of heat now coming on these leaders for apparently ignoring or not taking these advisories too seriously. What are your reactions to that, especially in the world of international relations?
Well, there is a point that is being made, and it is a valid point, that what's going on right now is not simply a Kenyan affair. It's a geopolitical issue. And as the president pointed out, there are attacks in different places, and you don't hear advisories about those things. So there is a point to be accepted in that. I agree with the minister and the president. It is bigger than just saying that don't go there or there. It's something else.
Do you think it was economic sabotage, the advisories then?
It's not just economic sabotage. It is a well-orchestrated effort to undermine the state of Kenya. Very well orchestrated.
Okay.
And all these things, you can see the trappings. Yeah? I mean, some of these attacks we've been seeing, they are not random. They are not accidental. They are not coincidental. They are orchestrated. One after the other after the other. And what is the effect? The effect is to create doubt in the minds of people as to whether they are safe and whether they can be safe.
However, Professor, a day later after the president said that, people were not safe. In fact, 147 people were not safe. They died.
Agreed.
Uh-huh.
But that's the point I just made. These attacks are not random. Because when those attacks took place, there were also problems in Turkana. At the same time, almost. You look what happened in Mandera. You look what happened in Wajir. What happened in Kapedo? What happened in Bogoria? These are not accidental. They are well orchestrated. And so the issue is, can those in authority get to the bottom of it? Who is the mastermind behind all these things? Because it's not enough to say the Al-Shabaab. It's not enough. There is more to it than just the Al-Shabaab.
Okay.
And that's what we need to get to the bottom of it.
All right. Prof?
I'm surprised actually by Professor's analysis. It's completely irrelevant to who is orchestrating the thing. You are supposed to be at the top of things. So there is a problem in our security architecture. We don't seem to be able to follow through on anything. And the lapses, you can just see them in our roads. Just drive from Nairobi to Nakuru. The traffic police officer will stop your car with his mbonde. We have a serious problem, and the beginning of getting a solution is not hiding behind the sabotage. It's accepting that we have a problem so that we can address it. We have a problem. When there's a warning that there may be an attack, follow through and falsify it. Mm-hmm. But don't ignore the warning.
No, I think
so we have a structural problem.
You are wrong. You are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You are wrong.
Why is that?
I did not say that you ignore anything. All I said is that this issue is bigger than just saying Al-Shabaab. That's all I said. I did not say you ignore anything.
Okay.
I just said pay attention to more than that.
All right.
You know, Prof gave examples. He talking about the Capendo. 21 police officers lost their lives in Capendo. They didn't wound anybody. They were armed. The other day, the governor of Mandera was attacked, ambushed. 4 people died, I think 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
There was no return fire. There was nobody who was injured on that side. So can we please accept one thing, that we need to revisit ourselves. We need to revisit the training that we receive. We need to see where is it that we are going wrong. And I suggest that we may have to send people to Rwanda to see how the security is structured.
All right.
You walk tomorrow to a bank in Nairobi. You are going to find the 2 police officers seated together with their guns next to them. And some of them, they will be on Facebook. You can just, and if you greet them, they will lift their hand and greet you like this.
So for you, it's not a matter of numbers, but deployment and how we do that. We will get to that. Okay.
It's not just the numbers. What I'm saying is security consciousness.
Right.
Our security consciousness is low.
Okay, hold
we
that
need
thought.
to accept that.
Hold that thought, Professor. We'll come to that in a moment. I will get to you, Mheshimiwa, but I'd just like to clarify something from you, Professor Munene, because you say these attacks are orchestrated.
Yes.
And this was in reaction to the question we'd asked about intelligence and that seemingly being played down, if you like. You say they're orchestrated. Who by? The West, the ones who are issuing the travel advisories?
Well, some of those people in the West are probably so. Look,
Is it your statement today that the attacks are orchestrated by people in the West, Professor?
by some people, that's why I said we need to get to the bottom of it. Let's look at this thing. In the last, let's say the last 2 years, the Somali government itself needs to answer a few questions. Okay, in the last 2 years.
We'll have the foreign minister and he'll answer some of your
And,
questions.
maybe the foreign minister can do it.
Yeah.
What have we seen in the last 2 years? Suddenly, the Somali are saying that Kenyan land, Kenyan waters is theirs. Suddenly. Suddenly, in those 2 years, what have we also seen? We've seen a lot of multinational companies running into that area, prospecting and getting special licenses. Some of them are in doubt as to how they were obtained. We know that they had conflicts within the Somali government. We know that. But the quarrels they are having are also related to who is issuing licenses, to which company, to which country, for what purpose.
All right, so
and then giving
Professor-
them guarantees.
Okay.
No,
Professor,
so
let's
we-
join
so
the dots
we-
of your
let's look
conversation.
at-
So how would that then translate to violence in Kenya?
Now,
Just help us connect the dots.
some of the things we are hearing. The UN issued a report last year, okay, about some people, high officials in the Somali government, who are probably involved in diverting the ammunition they get to the Al-Shabaab. Okay? That's a UN report. Some of the advisors, supposed advisors, connected with former mercenaries and having deep control or interest in the central bank of Somalia. We having tight, very good connections with some operators in South Africa, having very good connections with some top lawyers in the US who have been pursuing some of the frozen money. Look, these are things that we cannot just ignore.
Okay.
Okay? If indeed
Yeah.
the Somali arms are diverted to the Al-Shabaab, then we have to ask why.
Does that take away, Mheshimiwa, from the fact that we seem to have been caught flat-footed again in Garissa?
Okay, first and foremost, allow me to say that I sympathize with that very unfortunate event, especially with the statement that was made by the President and the CS. I actually sympathize with them because they would not make the same statement maybe a day later. I want to say sympathize with them because there was lack of information. And I'm at the same time very, very disappointed with the Australian and the Americans who actually issued the travel advisories. It means they had the information. And instead of sharing this intelligence information with our forces, with our NSIS, they decided to issue travel advisories. And actually, they did it from here, from Kenya. It's like rocking the same boat that you're in the same boat, but you're actually rocking it without knowing that you can actually be able to
But
sink.
the advisory was to their own residents.
It was down to their own residents.
Not to the government or the Kenyan people.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. But they did that, knowing very well that there was going to be an attack. Why didn't they share this information? And I was reading somewhere today that at the moment, there seems to be a go-slow between the authorities of the UK and especially the UK because of the stand that the president has taken not to actually renew the agreement to actually allow them to continue training the soldiers in Nanyuki. But that cannot be a good reason really for you to withhold intelligence or go slow
So
on
you
something
believe,
that affects a nation.
Mheshimiwa, that they withheld information?
I believe they withheld
Okay.
information because there's no way they can be having half information. At the same time, just to recap on what Monene has said, I don't think it's a business of America, a business of UK or Australia to actually protect Kenya. We should not assume that the friendly nations have any responsibility of our security.
Right.
It is us as a nation to actually be able to protect ourselves.
Okay.
We should be looking at the problem at hand, not looking up to who never gave the information or
Right.
not.
So then,
Very, very
shouldn't that
important.
suggest that we should have had our own information to begin with, travel advisories or not?
Well, we should
Was
have
that
had
a failing
our own
on our part?
information, and it's possible that we had the information, but it may not have been very, very accurate. Because what we did with the information actually the problem. Because prior to that attack, there was information because I know universities had notices, even Nairobi University, that there could be an attack. But what exactly to do with it? Because you look at the number of universities that are there in Kenya,
Right.
you look at the number of colleges, they're not really very, very, very many that we can't actually be able to cover them. And we were caught flat-footed because having 4 guards at the gate, knowing very well Garissa University is the only institution in Northern Frontier,
All right.
I don't know whether it never crossed our mind that actually this could be a target.
Well, it should have crossed our mind.
Yes, it should have crossed
Yeah.
our mind.
Mheshimiwa, this is really what shouldn't have happened. Once that information was out, our security system should have sat down and mapped the country.
Okay.
And they say where there is a high probability that an attack will take place, and then act to protect that place.
Okay.
So
Prof,
you don't have to protect the whole country. You simply map out
The hot
the area that can be a target.
Okay, Prof, I'd like you to just hold that thought because in terms of sharing information, it's important for us to understand how this happens. And perhaps Elkanah Odembo, who's a former ambassador to the US, who joins us now on phone. We thank you for joining us this evening, Ambassador. What are your thoughts on how we handle the travel advisories and information? And perhaps you can shed light as to how information is shared between Kenya and her allies, her partners, or the international community.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. First, of course, I'd like to condole with the families that are directly affected. All of Kenya is affected by this, but my prayers and thoughts are with the families that are directly affected by this. It's an unfortunate thing. If I can say a thing or two about the travel advisory.
Yes.
Travel advisory is simply a government issuing a warning to its citizens about their plans to travel, or if they have already traveled, what they should do or should not do, or if they live and work in a foreign country and there's reason for their government to be concerned, they warn them. And any responsible government has that responsibility. So I'm a bit puzzled by some of what I'm hearing being said by the panel, because we had a situation where both cabinet secretaries and His Excellency the President both came out admonishing foreign governments who are friends and allies of Kenya for issuing travel advisories. It does not make sense that when our friends are issuing warnings to their citizens who are in our country, that we should react the way that we did.
Ambassador, let me...
Information is shared. It is not true that you can have a handful of intelligence officers for either the Australian, the American, or British government with information that they do not share with our intelligence. The way that intelligence systems work is that intelligence is shared. Intelligence information is always shared. I mean, we have a situation where even our own universities issued warnings to their students.
Yeah. There's no
So how can we say that the Australians and the Brits and the Americans were out of line to issue a travel warning to their own citizens? They're looking after their citizens. They're concerned about their citizens. Can we say the same of our government?
All right, hold that thought right there, Professor. And we have some of those pictures that we can show on air of those warnings that were posted in your own university, Professor. So clearly, USIU took this threat very seriously as well, and we'll have those pictures on screen in a moment. So how would you explain that universities such as the one you lecture in took these threats seriously, but that the government didn't?
Let's put it this way. The warnings, I think the information was there, generally. And I guess the question that comes in, the response time of the government was not maybe the most efficient, that we can put it that way. I do not think that the government ignored as such the warnings. And the issue that's being raised here is not just telling people that there is a problem coming. There is a likelihood of an attack somewhere. It is more than the political dimensions of these statements, that when they are issued, the net effect, and then they are issued in such a way as to create an impression that something is terribly wrong, which essentially undermines.
However, Professor, we struggle to understand what you're saying, that something is terribly wrong.
Yeah.
147 people are dead.
Yes.
This is twice the number of those that died in Westgate.
Yeah.
This is the second biggest attack,
Yeah.
the second actually largest attack since the August 1998 bombing.
Yeah.
When you say that they're trying to create an impression that things are bad and not that bad, some would say you're sort of demeaning the whole catastrophe of Garissa.
To start with, let me put it this way. The death of 147 people is a terrible thing. The death of one person is a terrible thing.
Absolutely.
And my concern here is, if what I was reading in the media is correct, the response time it took, that we over-delayed in acting as a country, requires a serious reassessment of everything. That is true. I would agree with the professor in that regard.
Okay.
That there is serious need for reassessment of the structures of the arrest. The response mechanism. That one is not. Nobody is saying that.
That is not in question.
That's not in the question at all.
All right. All right. Professor?
Yvonne, my worry is that we seem to be afraid in this country of truth. Seriously afraid of truth. When Westgate happened, I wouldn't have expected as a citizen for us to have a serious committee of inquiry to find out where our lapses were, to allow that brazen attack in the middle of our capital. We are scared to know what happened, so we didn't do it.
But that report
Now,
is there. And
the result is there, but there is issues about it,
yes.
and I'm aware of that.
Yes.
But look at us, the way we react. We know we are at war. So you would expect that we would have what is called a rapid deployment force. That would have several serious helicopter and gun ships sitting somewhere in northern Kenya or somewhere near the coast. People 24 hours sitting on the cockpit, waiting to take off. So that the response, when there is an alarm, it takes less than 5 minutes. You would expect that to be happening. You would expect in Nairobi, we have serious war climbers. People who climb walls and they come and rescue people if they are taken hostage in buildings. You expect that team is sitting 24 hours because we're in a state of war. So you expect total preparedness. So there is no question of talking about the delayed response.
Right.
If you have been at war for 3 years, where is the question of delayed response coming from? What this government needs is people are honest to advise this government, not somebody who is trying to to tell you what they think you would like to hear. But an honest assessment of our preparedness to confront this situation, which I believe personally we should never put ourselves into it in the first place.
Okay, and we'll talk about Somalia. Yes, Mheshimiwa.
Yeah, I am listening to my good brother here saying we are at war. You know, Yvonne, we are actually dealing with a faceless organization. I don't want to believe that our presence in Somalia as a part of AMISOM can actually be figured out as a war against Somalia. Kenya is not at war with Somalia. In the first place, what our forces are doing there as part of AMISOM is one, to actually be able to keep peace in Somalia. They are helping the federal government of Somalia to actually be able to, one, have an environment that can allow foreign aid that actually, because Somalia is very dry, most of the time they get aid from different organizations. And without that protection, without that help, they cannot be able to get that aid. Secondly, they train their forces. And thirdly, now they help them fight the Al-Shabaab. So it means actually, I am very, very surprised when the federal government of Somalia does not appreciate that we are actually helping them out.
Do you think they don't appreciate
I don't
the
think they appreciate, because if they did,
Uh-huh.
I would not be seeing the kind of things I'm seeing. They would not be claiming that, for example, the territory extends into our waters. The other day, I saw when I was reading somewhere that they had actually claimed there was no need for us to have our presence there. We should actually give them support in terms of training, which has actually happened. And I want to inform you that before the KDF went to Somalia, and before the Somalia government was put in place, they had massive training in Kenya, and partly in Isiolo. And I want to believe part of the soldiers who were trained actually are people of Somali origin, but who are Kenyans, who actually went there. The same way sometimes they recruit Kenyan. You can have.
I would want to
Yes,
want to stop you there, because we have no proof. Like you say, you would want to believe that.
But
that
you
is
know,
happening.
it is evident. I was talking to
We
a
would want
legislator
to
the
believe
other day.
that as well if we had the evidence to
I
back
want
that
to give
up,
you.
Mheshimiwa.
I want to give you a national evidence, international evidence. If you go to the forces of United States of America and UK, you can actually be able to apply to be a soldier in UK and in America as a Kenyan. I know Kenyans who work in the defense forces
Yeah, right. The Royal Air
in the
Force
same
and that sort
same
of
way
thing.
we had soldiers who actually applied to be in Somalia, and most of them are Somali origin but Kenyans.
Okay.
And most of them may have gone there and they were not satisfied with the situation and environment that they are. And somehow they found their way back into the northern frontier. They are there with the training, they are frustrated, they don't know what to do. And those are the easy targets for the Al-Shabaab, because Al-Shabaab is a faceless thing that actually has been pushed out of operation in Kismayo and in those other towns, and they want to continue operating.
Okay.
So what they do, they come back to the sympathizers here. So we should be dealing with the real situation of how can we actually be able to fight this faceless thing instead of blaming our government all the time, because the problem is deep-rooted in our society.
Okay.
It
I'd
will
like
not be
you-
just with the government.
All right. I'd like us to bring in, at this point, a perfect moment to bring in the Somali Foreign Minister, Mheshimiwa Abdusalam Hadliye Omer. Thank you very much for joining us on Checkpoint tonight. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Let's talk about the Al-Shabaab menace and just what it'll take to bring it under control, bearing in mind all the attacks on Kenya. What does that mean for you, bringing them under control?
Thank you for having me. I can hear
You have
everything
given
very
what I
well,
consider
but,
very good information
I
and
think
a
the
serious
question
one.
is, what do it take to bring it under control? Is that correct?
Sorry, can you hear us? All right, we seem to be having problems with
I
that.
can't hear you very well.
Okay, maybe we can attempt to get that phone call one more time, because I think we're having problems with that connection. Let's stick with Somalia for just a moment, because all of the attacks, including this one, even when they claimed responsibility, they said it is because your forces are in Somalia. We've had this controversial topic on Checkpoint before about what our exit strategy from Somalia should be and when that will be. Prof, are we clear in our minds about that? Solving the situation and the problem of Al-Shabaab in Somalia once and for all. Do you think we're on track with that?
I don't think we are, and I don't think we are clear. And this is what I would expect my president to do. I would expect them to explain to the country what is our mission in Somalia. because that is still not very clear to me. With these attacks we are suffering, this to me sounds more like a man who leaves his house on fire and then goes to put out the fire in another person's house. Somalia, to me, is not vital to the Republic of Kenya, because people go to war because the Mheshimiwa says we are not in war, but people are dying. What is war? War is when people die in the kind of numbers they are dying now. You go to war when you are vital interest, your very existence is at stake, because war is not a nice thing.
That is what we were meant to believe, though, in 2011 when KDF went into Somalia.
What our vital interests were at stake with the Somalia. Uganda is our largest trading partner. If it is Uganda, we shouldn't go to war anytime to stabilize it. Somalia, in my opinion, is not worthy. What we are doing, we have not sat down and calculated now that they have claimed our territory. They have basically declared war on Kenya, because when you claim somebody's territory, it means actually that you can also use force to get it.
Let's hear from the other professor.
So do we really have to be in Somalia? What exactly our interest in being in Somalia are? We need to make that definition. We need to make our case. The president needs to make a case to the people of Kenya. A very strong case.
Okay.
Why we
I
need
would
to
like
be
to
there.
inform you on that before you go to Professor.
Carry on.
The presence of our forces in Somalia is part of the AMISOM forces. That was a UN resolution, and actually it was even passed by the AU. And there are several countries that have their forces there, and actually about 10 or 12 African countries. I'm not very sure about the number. Then as neighbors, it would not really be prudent, actually, as some of the beneficiaries of the peace that will happen in Somalia, not to have our forces there. The question is, if all those countries, including Ethiopia, which has got the longest boundary with Somalia, are in Somalia and are not being attacked. Uganda is there, Burundi is there, Nigeria is there, Ghana is there, Djibouti is there. Why Kenya? Then there must be something you should pin out, you should actually point out that is actually the problem with Kenya. And I think it has something to do with the fact that the Somali people, who are homogeneous, they come all the way from Mogadishu, Kisimayu, all the way to here, right here in Garissa. They are our people. We have part of them who are Somalis of Kenyan origin. The question is, we have not been able to have very patriotic Somalis.
Is that your statement tonight, Mheshimiwa? Somalis
who can actually be able to identify and say,
Kenyans of Somali origin are not patriotic? Is that
the
what you're saying?
ones who actually moved in here. We know they moved in here during Barre's time, CN Barre's time. We have a lot of them living here because Somalia initially did not have a population of 10 million. There were more than that. Why do we have only 10 million at the moment? It means most of them moved out, and most of them moved here in Kenya. And we know, under a certain regime, they were given IDs to come and live in Kenya. We consider them as Kenyans, and most of them are not. The Kenyans of Somali origin are very patriotic. The ones of Kenyan origin, they are very patriotic. And they are there denouncing
Well, of
Somalis.
course, then
But
the ones
because
who are not Kenyan have no business being patriotic because
they
they're not
live here.
Kenyan, Mheshimiwa.
But they live here.
So your argument doesn't wash.
They live here.
It?
They live here. And actually, that is what the problem is.
So do you expect these people who are not Kenyan to be patriotic to Kenya? Is that what you're saying?
We expect the people who live with them to actually be able to point them out and say, this is the problem.
I think I would like really to interject them, because I don't think this problem, what we are suffering through, has anything to do with the Somali from Somalia or even our brothers here. I don't think so. I think what has happened here is the Americans very cleverly inserted this country into an international jihadist war.
Okay. I'd like you to hold that thought, Professor, because Kenya did go to Somalia in 2011, and this is even before the AMISOM agreement, of which we are now a part of. Professor, let's talk about our relations with Somalia, and, from an international standpoint, what do you think it'll take, and whether this is a relationship that is working, and whether we are working very closely with Somalia in terms of taming al-Shabaab. And I will remind us all that we went into Somalia alone in 2011 before we got embedded into AMISOM later.
To start with, let me state that Somalia is critical to Kenya's security and other interests. And in fact, all our neighbors are critical. Our first line of interest concern is our neighbors. Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Uganda, Tanzania. The immediate neighbors. And anything happening there is of direct interest to Kenya. When Somalia has serious problems, when the government there collapsed, we had all those refugees that came to Kenya. That's a concern. So it is in Kenya's interest to stabilize that place. And once it is properly stabilized, and they have Kenya have to create a government. Okay? It has had serious problems. But it has to create some sort of a stable government in the expectation that once that government is stable and runs the country, we shall not be having all those refugees.
Prof, when do you think, Prof, just to interject, when do you think that'll be? Because since obviously the grenade attacks and everything we're having here are as a direct result of our incursion into Somalia in 2011, when do you think would be an appropriate time for us to pull out of Somalia? And do you think that is what will bring an end to the attacks in Kenya?
I don't think that will bring an end to an attack, because some of these attacks have been so well nurtured. In fact, one of the problems we have is that our youth, 10-year-olds, have been radicalized, and such that they have been inculcated in that culture in different parts of the country, not just Isili, but in different parts. This is a reality that we have to deal with, because down the line, these are the people to worry about. So the mental attitude of the people who have been indoctrinated in this, the Al-Shabaab, the Boko Harams, the IS, these are some, circuit. Now, when is it that Kenya should get out? I think the policymakers, and this is where the challenge is, the policymakers really have to think hard whether they have accomplished their mission. Because when they went there on a proper mission, and they said this was what they were doing.
Right.
So I do not want to second guess them, because that would be second guessing.
But they went in to stem Al-Shabaab. And now Al-Shabaab is even more of a problem.
Yeah, but it was also here before even that.
It was also here before even then, which is why they kept coming in and doing the kidnapping.
In fact, when we started, I pointed out, in the last 2 years have been very funny. In the last 2 years.
In what way?
Kenya and Somalia. If the reports we've been getting are true,
what reports?
That the government in Somalia gets weapons which are then diverted to the Al-Shabaab, then we have to ask serious questions about it, which means the Al-Shabaab are simply proxies of something else.
Okay.
And
so let's be
proxies,
explicit, Prof. As, we're taking our final comment, so I'd like you to be very explicit in what you say. So Al-Shabaab, according to you, are proxies.
Yes.
Of who?
That's one we need to find out. That's
the ones who are issuing the travel advisories, perhaps? You made that link in the beginning.
No, I mean, those who are running for the oil blocks around the... they should be asked a few questions.
All right. Okay.
And then there are also these funny things. In fact, within the British Parliament, questions were being raised about the connections of these things, whether there is something funny going on.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yvonne, I would like to interject. Professor. If you are going to solve this problem, we need to think a bit more deeply. He's a professor of history.
Yeah.
And I want to believe he knows that Siadimbare was top on in 1994. Between 1991.
Yes.
Between 1991 and 2011, we have lived very peacefully with our brothers both in Somalia and the ones who came here as refugees. Peacefully.
That is not true.
We didn't have attacks.
However,
the Chifta war was there. I know about the Chifta war.
Yes, but then there was also remember the kidnappings that took place
and
the incursions into, which is what took us into Somalia in the first
place. The kidnapping which happened. Here, I think Mheshimiwa Mudomi explained the kidnappings. Because he said we are training the Somali police or the Somali military. Right. What he said, our Shabab saw that as aggression. What is happening here is we are involved. We say AMSOM. Who is paying for AMSOM? There's African, so-called African force. Right. We are doing a proxy war ourselves. A proxy war for America. A proxy war for Israel.
Okay.
This is a problem that is coming directly from the Middle East. Now, because this problem is coming elsewhere, and this country is so small, We can neither influence Israel nor can we influence
Right.
America.
Okay.
So it's hard
Prof,
for us
to
to really engage.
So if, Mheshimiwa, and just your final thoughts, if you can, in a minute and a half at the most, if, like he says, it's a proxy war or not, gentlemen, we are at war and we are casualties.
Yeah.
And we've had 147 people casualties of proxy war or whatever you want to call it. Mheshimiwa, let's wind up with you. Final thoughts on solutions on how to win this war, proxy or
Even
otherwise.
as I wind, Yvonne, allow me to actually send my condolences to the bereaved families and actually congratulate Kenyans because of their resilience at the moment, because we are so united behind the whole of this attack by Al-Shabaab. I want to say that Al-Shabaab is like it's like a snake. Unfortunately, the tail is in Somalia, and the head is here. And we out there we are fighting the tail, and the head is right here. Because if you look at what happened in Garissa, those students are saying very clearly that these people are speaking very good Kiswahili. If you check the national language or the available language for Somali origin themselves in Somalia, they speak Arabic and Somali only. What does that tell you? It tells you that the Al-Shabaab is living amongst us.
Okay.
And until a time when we separate religion, the Somali and Al-Shabaab themselves, because those are different things. The Somali and the religion, the Muslim religion, are totally separate entity, which should not be associated with Al-Shabaab, because even back in Somalia, Al-Shabaab kills Muslims. But here, they kill the Christians so that they can actually leave us in dismay and in disarray, so that we can continue fighting against ourselves. Because their main aims is to cause terror so that we can be vulnerable and make the forces pull out of there.
All right. And I think that's a good place to leave our discussion tonight. Local solutions, perhaps, to finding this. And I like your distinction about the Somalis and Islam and Al-Shabaab, and it's important for us to make that distinction. Gentlemen, I thank you so much for your time today. It's definitely a subject we will continue to talk about, making some headway in that regard. I'd also like to thank Ambassador Elkanah Odembo, as well as the Somali Foreign Minister, whom we were not able to get due to a bad connection, but we thank him nonetheless for making the time to be with us. That's our discussion on Checkpoint. Some hot topics coming out of that talk, but as always, we like to sum it up. So, John Alanamo, who's been following our discussion tonight, what's the point?
As always, very interesting perspectives on Checkpoint, especially about Somalia and its interest, or rather the interest of Kenya in Somalia and how this portends for the war on terror. But there are very many points that we need to get through. I just have 3 this evening. The first one is, of course, on the sharing of information. Yvonne spoke about that with her guests this evening on the intelligence briefs that may have been given to the Kenyan government prior to those warnings that were issued by the United Kingdom, by Australia. The former ambassador to the United States, Elkanah Odembo, is quite clear about why exactly it is they're issued. So why the dismissive attitude towards those kinds of advisories? They are, of course, acting in the interest of their own citizens who might be trading or doing business or visiting this country. But nonetheless, a warning is a warning, and it points to something very serious, either a serious lapse or an impending attack. Wouldn't it behoove the Kenyan government to investigate those warnings first and then dismiss them, rather than dismissing them prior to investigating? Secondly, is it time to talk strategy around Somalia? We got into Somalia in October of 2011 to pursue Al-Shabaab combatants who had kidnapped tourists along the coastal region, who had perpetrated grenade attacks prior to October. Remember the Kampala bus bombings in May of 2011. There was a point to why we went in Somalia. But every strategy must have an end. Every entry must have an exit. What is Kenya's exit plan? Is it time to discuss whether we're in Somalia in the long haul, whether because we rehatted under AMISOM, that means that we are there indefinitely until Somalia is a stable nation? Shouldn't we be discussing these things at least for the sake of giving reprieve to citizens who actually contribute to the Kenya Defense Forces, whether under AMISOM or not? After all, Kenya Defense Forces are Kenyans, and the government owes Kenya those kinds of answers. And finally, terrorism has been spoken about through many, very many points this week, given what happened in Garissa. But is it a global issue or a local issue? That's something that seems to be something of a sticking point for the government. The government seems to insist, continues to insist, as it has since the Westgate attacks, that terrorism is a global issue. And it is. Given the actions of the Al-Shabaab, the flamboyant manner in which they are carrying out these attacks, flamboyant and bloody, it seems that there is a franchising of ideas and a borrowing of ideas between the Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram and other terrorist groups. The allegiances between Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab point to that. But what are the local points in being able to fight terrorism? What are the local fault lines that perhaps we before pointing outward and saying that it is a global problem? How can we fight terrorism better in Kenya? We know that corruption is an issue. We know that our security forces perhaps do not have the training and capacity that they need to fight terrorism in this day and age. What are we doing about it before pointing to the fact that terrorism is global? And that is the point.